Good morning, art lovers. My name is Jennifer Steck. I'm a leadership team member for Artburst Studios and the host of our Artburst Live event today. And we are so excited to feature Bobbi Baugh this morning. Good morning, Bobbi.
Good morning. Hi, Jennifer. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here.
We met Bobbi last summer when we were looking for unique and fabulous artists for the Poetry in Motion show, which occurred in October of last year on the Artburst Studios website. And not only were we intrigued by Bobbi's work, we just love the uniqueness of it. We loved that she works in fiber. And then we discovered after working with her that she is not only an incredible artist, but she's also a wonderful person. And we have enjoyed working with her, gosh, through that show and actually with connections after the show is over. And we're hopeful at some point that Bobbi will join us once again. So we love you, Bobbi. Thank you for being part of the Artburst family.
Thank you, Jennifer.
My first question for you this morning is, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I can. Well, I'll start with my name. My name is Bobbi, and that itself is a creative act. My given name when I was born was Barbara. My family called me Barbara. And somewhere around fifth grade, my girlfriends and I decided, we were going to stick it to the man. We were going to make our own names. And so we all came up with nicknames. And I went through several that were terrible. And thanks be to God, they didn't last. But eventually I came up with Bobbi, and that stuck. And I have thought of myself as Bobbi forever since then, and it's sort of a creative thing. So when I introduce myself and I say I'm Bobbi, that's meaningful to me, just my name alone. I live in DeLand, Florida. 2 days ago, I turned 70. I'm still processing that. I'm thinking, how is this possible? You just think that's what old people are. And so anyway, but I am. My studio is in my home, and we have a not so fancy house in a not so fancy neighborhood, but it has everything that we need. And as in Florida, there are a lot of homes that have a carport on the side, and people tend to close them in and make them into extra rooms. And so that's what my studio is. So if you envision the size of a single car garage, that's how much room I've got. And to me, it's fabulous. I come in here and I think, oh my goodness, I have all this room. I can make things. I have friends that who have larger, fancier places who come in and they go, oh, how do you work in here? So I guess it's relative how you feel about your space. And I'm basically a pretty simple soul. My life is pretty simple. My art making methods are simple. I hope that what you see is, who I am. So that's enough about me.
I love hearing that. And I love that you embraced Bobbi. I think we've all gone through kind of those nicknames as we go. And it's kind of nice to have your studio so close when you get those bursts of inspiration.
It is. I can get up in the morning and say to John, bye, honey, going to work, and walk into the studio. There I am. So,
so tell us more about how your creative journey started and how it led to where you are today.
I have always felt like an art maker. I always did things. I took that most seriously when I went to school. I graduated from Stetson University, which is here in DeLand, and that's how I came to be in DeLand. I came here to go to Stetson, and I never left. And I like talking about this because I think some people who are here are art makers themselves, and they always wonder how other people got there. And the ones who are not art makers, but who just appreciate art, we artists, we want you to know there's stuff going on behind the scenes here. We went through things to get to this place. So I was a double major. I was a studio art major, and it was just a very, very small liberal arts program. So we had a dabbling of everything. I took a drawing class, a photography class, a watercolor class, a ceramics class, just a little bit of everything, but allowed me to focus on art making. And my second major was speech communication. I was very active in public speaking. So when I left, graduated, almost immediately, a whole bunch of life things happened. I got married. Several days after graduation, my former husband and I started a business, and lo and behold, the business absorbed our life for over 30 years. And so you have to put on hold other things. So somewhere around 2010, I began to know inside myself that this was not where I was supposed to be. I was not supposed to be in this marriage. That also meant I was going to be leaving our business. That would have to happen over time. and it would be a whole new life. And that was also the beginning of a creative burst, what I had put on hold for a long time. I had dabbled, I tried some things on the side. I was doing crafts and different stuff. I thought, well, this is it. I can really do art now. And so about that time, I was doing a series of, well, actually, I did a project with a friend in Missouri that I had met out at wholesale shows. I was doing craft wholesale shows, and that flopped. And so then it was time for a new thing. And I said, I'm just going to have to learn a new art form here. So I know about watercolor and I know a little about fabric and collage. I'm going to do 50 paintings of the same thing over and over and over again. So I had a little vase with the flowers in it, and I did 50 paintings. And I said, once a week, I'm going to send one to her. So she'll be my accountability partner. And I'll just keep working this and working this and working this till at the end, I feel like I've learned a new thing. And well, it went faster. Once I got started, I did the 50 paintings in, I think, maybe 26 or 27 weeks. And I was just flooding her with all of these things. And she wanted to be a photographer. So her job was to take photographs and send them to me. And it was, such a simple little project. I'm sure anyone who has taken a step-by-step or a daily practice class has done some similar thing, but it opened up everything for me. And during that process, I guess I'd heard of textile arts. As part of my life change journey, I felt like, well, I had to go out and meet some new people here in town because, everything in my life was new. And I found an art group locally that had a bunch of textile artists, and several I had known slightly. So that became my local art group. And from them, I learned that there was such a thing as textile arts. And from that, I learned there was such a thing as art quilts. And once I got my hands in glue and fabric and paint together, the bells went off in my head. And I said, this is it. This is where I'm supposed to be. And so I've been trying to learn how to do that better ever since starting that about 2010.
I mean, what would we do without our fellow artists?
They're everything. It's so important to have either an art buddy locally or, through the magic of Zoom, you can be a friend with someone far away, or a group that you meet with regularly. So I'm still with that art group now. So we're now, 15 years later. And it's a diverse group of people. Some are very accomplished, some are not so accomplished, but there's wonderful camaraderie and mutual encouragement. And that, being in a group is everything, I think.
I think so too. They're the ones that when that little voice in our head says, nobody's going to like our art, and, right, the imposter kind of
Right.
stuff, that they're saying, no, you're on the right track. Keep pushing. We believe in you. And those deadlines are more
Yeah.
than helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. I like deadlines.
Yes. So you talked a little bit about the fiber. What is it about fiber and textiles that you love and that has helped you focus in on that medium?
Well, part of it, which I think you'll see when we look at the pictures, is that it's so tactile. First of all, my method of putting things together is collage. That means I glue stuff together. Not all quilters do that. In fact, most quilters don't do that. So my hands are really in it. I am very physically involved in the stuff that I make. And I usually have glue all over my fingers. And so there's just something to feel and touch. And also then the process of working in textiles means that there's a whole extra step that you don't get when you're painting directly. Although I love painting, and I'm trying to think of how to get watercolor effects more in the work that I'm doing. But there you are, it's you and the canvas, and you address it directly. It's going to work or it's not going to work. With textiles, especially if you create your own textiles, which I do, then there's this whole extra step. You have to make the stuff and then put the stuff in your work. Whereas, if you were painting, you'd do a brush stroke to get it dark. Now I have to go print something dark, find it, cut it out, glue it in, and it's just involved in it in a different way, not better or worse, but just different. And I really like that.
Yes. It adds to those layers, I know, that you absolutely adore, and that we adore seeing that depth.
Yeah.
So can you tell us how a project would start?
I'm an idea person and I'm a planner. And I'm also, as part of where I am in life, I'm trying to develop my skills as a writer and be a better writer. My chosen medium is poetry. So I read poetry all the time. I write poetry pretty regularly. That's a daily discipline for me. And so I think about stuff. I think about the meaning of life. I think about if you read someone like Mary Oliver, she just goes out, she looks at a leaf, she looks at a bird. That could be very simple, or that could be glib, or a cheesy Hallmark card, but it's not. She looks at a very simple thing and sees deep meaning in it. I think that's important, to see deep meaning in simple things. And I'm also somewhat autobiographical. I like working out the things that have happened in my life. And it was really a discovery to me to realize that, which I didn't know as an undergrad at all. I just painted pictures of things. That it could be a story about me, or about something, about an idea, or about a stage of life that could be put into. So I start with ideas. What am I thinking about? What's interesting to me? Maybe what am I writing about? Then I get out the sketchbook and I start working out compositions. And my sketchbook is, I don't do complex sketchbooks where I'm dealing with processes, painting and collaging, and I admire people who do that. But to me, I think, shoot, if I'm going to do all that work, I could have put it in the art. So it's just not how I work. But I do lots of sketches and mostly working out composition. So I'll take the idea, like if I have an idea, I want, a tree and a girl, with the tree on the left and the girl on the right, the girl on the left, the tree on the right, one big, one small, work it out over and over and over again, one in front of the other, one behind the other, until suddenly I say, yep, I think that's what I'm going for. So I had the idea, and then I sketch, and then I start putting it together.
You begin with an idea in mind, basically, as you
Yes.
start working with the fabric. You've worked out some of the problem solving things in the sketchbook, and then translate it onto your canvas, which is textiles.
Right. So that's my intent, that I have it all worked out. It never turns out the way I planned. So, and that's a good thing. So that's where serendipitously along the way, sometimes I followed exactly the sketch I had in the book, and I looked at it and say, shoot, there's nothing going on there. Bad plan. Time to see what happens next. And that's sometimes actually that's where layers come from. I thought it was going to be done, but it wasn't. And so then there was more to add, but there's no way to figure that out until you're in the middle of it and you actually done it and you see if what you thought was going to work worked or not.
That's almost kind of the fun part
Oh
is,
yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, it's
So
the
there's discovery.
frustration and
Right.
kind of sometimes that ugly stage that then leads to something amazing.
Oh, I definitely go through the ugly stage. And so it gives you that right brain, left brain thing where, part of me has it all planned out what I think I'm going to do. And then because, I'm an artist, I hope I listen to what I'm making. I hope I look at what I'm making, and then respond and say, oh no, it's got to be different. I thought this, but this instead. And so it's a sum of those two things.
Do you work on multiple pieces at once, or do you
Usually,
focus?
usually I usually have one big piece going, and I have not made a lot this year. I think I've just made 3 pretty big size quilts, and I have quilting friends who are cranking out one a week. God bless them. I just can't do it. They take me a long time to create a large quilt. Um, so I started a number of years ago working in paper collage, really kind of just as a palette cleanser, a little something to do in between. And I found I like that. I like collaged works and somewhat smaller works, and then a couple of big textile things going at the same time in the studio. And some of it is just logistical. While something is drying, then I can go work on the other thing. While the glue is drying, I can do something else.
Yes. Now you've got several pieces to share with us.
I do. And I hope
Understand.
this will make this all make sense. All right, so let's do share screen and see if I can pull that off.
This is one of the best parts of this. I always love seeing these.
All right, so I hope you're looking at a picture of a big artwork. Yes?
You are? We are.
So this is a finished product. This is a quilt called Discerning What Is Real. It's pretty big. It's about 40 some inches high by 60 some inches wide. And you'll notice I made it in 2 panels. Part of that is I like making work in panels. I think they're very interesting. The composition is interesting. And also logistically, I can't make a big quilt on my little machine easily. So that's part of why I sometimes put them in panels. So there's the finished thing.
It's gorgeous.
I'm
Jennifer says absolutely stunning.
Thank you. This was the inspiration. And we'll go back and see the finished thing again at the end. This is a little spit of water next to my house. I mean, it's actually a drainage ditch. The depth across that water there is probably no more than about 7 feet. So I'm driving down the road very close to my house, and I saw this little drainage ditch with the reflections of the trees, and something about it just spoke to me. I said, that's so intriguing. You've got the real trees going up in the air. You've got the reflected trees going down into the water. You see things in the foreground, you see things in the background, what's real, what's not real. I thought that's really an intriguing idea to play with. I would like to play with that a lot. So I took 2 photos. Actually, I took a number of photos, and these were the final crops that I came from. I said, well, I'm going to make these into a quilt. So at that point, I have the inspiration. I know there's going to be some photography in the work. My method is to output photographs onto paper as laser color copies. I take them to my local copy shop and they make them for me. Then I tape them together manually if they're going to be real big, because each copy can't be bigger than 11 by 17, 11 inches by 17 inches. And so then I tape them together and then I transfer them onto fabric. So at this point, I think this is a photo of the copies that I got from the copy shop. So then my next step is to start making and gathering fabric. I don't have big stashes of fabric filling my wall. If you visit some quilter studios, they do. I mean, it's a big deal to stock up fabric. Either they can't help themselves when they go to the fabric store, which I understand, or that the appeal of making fabric is just so wonderful they can't stop. I understand that too. But I try to focus pretty much on what I think I need for a project. And you can see here, I was working on the browns and the oranges. I had looked past the water, sort of thinking of all of that ambiguous color going on behind the trees where there's a lot of brush. It's not really a beautiful setting. It's just kind of mud and a little water and some trees. So I wanted to get some of that earthiness in there. And I always have some fabric left over. So invariably, I'll have something from a previous project that gets into this project. And I think that's really interesting. It gives me some continuity and a vocabulary of things that I make that will show up in more than one piece. And I use all kinds of methods, some of which are shown in these pieces in my hand. Everything is low tech. I am the ultimate low tech girl. I only work with acrylic paints on fabric. I use plain, regular artist grade acrylic paints in my fabric. I don't use special paints. I use a very limited palette, and I mix all of my own colors. And then all of the methods that I use are simple things that you could teach kids in Vacation Bible School or art camp. You know, really, really simple methods, but they are able to make sophisticated patterns. So I use relief prints, you know, or you stamp with something that you've cut out. I have a vocabulary of blocks that I have cut. I use resists, where you put down some sort of wheat paste or glue and then paint over it so what's underneath will show through. I do some screen printing. As you can see on the left there, those very linear things that look like trees. That's actually a photographic image of a tree that I took, and I had a silk screen made so I could print it, you know, more than one time, multiple times. I cut a lot of stencils. I use my own hand-cut stencils, and then I just mix and match these very, very simple techniques to get as complex imagery as I can. This is for the same piece, and this would be a normal way for me to work. This is like the old watercolorist in me, to get that fabric and tape it down on the sides like you would if you were working with watercolor paper. And because like watercolor paper, it's gonna, as it gets wet, it's gonna buckle. So you're doing a lot of the same concerns as you would if you were painting. And I try to keep a pretty limited palette within the piece I'm working on at one time so that I don't get my values mixed up. You know, now a slide ago, I was in those deep rust colors. So there will be more than one dominant color in the piece, but not on what I'm working on any given time. So if I think of that pretty much like a black and white and gray, except they're green and blue, I can see the lights and I can see the darks. And actually it's my own, I think it's my own limitation on being able to see color and value easily. When I have too much going on, I get mixed up. And so this way I can see I've got some darks, I've got some lights, and I'm creating the component parts there. So then I start putting them together. So this is a little piece of it when it was collaged. And you can see there behind the window, there are the trees that I had in my hand. Those are silk screened. At the top part of the panes through the window, you can see that's the piece I was just painting. I had added a lot more to it by the time I put it into the windows. And that window is, that's a repeating vocabulary piece for me. I love the image of windows because they give you something to look through. And then there's something behind the window and you go, oh, it's behind the window. And you can't help yourself. When you see a window, you look through it. You just want to know what's in there. And I didn't invent that part of our brain that makes people do that, but I think it's wonderful that it happens. And so I try to put something interesting inside the windows. So that's a photo transfer of a window, and then I cut out where the glass was because it had stuff going on in there that wasn't interesting. And then I put something behind the window to see that I think is interesting.
So
Um,
Bobby, can I
uh,
interrupt you just
yep.
quickly? So Cynthia would like to know what your printing method is.
Well, different things on different fabrics. Sometimes I print as monotype. For example, in these windows where you see that blue that looks a little like glass, that was sheer fabric. Think like your curtain shears, sheer fabric pressed onto a gelatin plate and acrylics. That's
Mm.
how I got that fabric. The trees behind the window, that's a different kind of printing. That was screen printed. The green above that was that big piece I was doing lots of different hand kind of printing on, where I don't think I had any gelatin printing on that. That was all a mix of resist and relief and stencils. So I use all kinds of different techniques. Here's another section of this same piece that shows, so at the top left, that's where we just were, that was that window. And now we're looking at the photographic element, which I've put there in the middle. And I've put that there are two photographic elements we're looking at. There's the trees and the reflection of the trees. And then over on the right-hand side, there's that very realistic ripple of water. I just thought it was just so beautiful as a photograph. I probably would not recreate it in a way that I responded to like I wanted, except as a photo. So I really like, this is part of what I'm doing, and this piece is an example of it, of creating my own reality. I'm not just photographing what I saw and painting it, because really who needed to? It was there. If I don't do something with it, then it wouldn't be interesting to me. Although I greatly admire landscape painters who find joy in reproducing something that they've seen that was inspiring and lovely. This was interesting to me because it wasn't so inspiring and lovely. It was just a little drainage ditch, but it was interesting to me to make it into something that had meaning.
It's
That bottom
beautiful.
section, thank you, that bottom section that again has that ethereal look, that's a very, very light touch of mono printing on the sheer fabric. So the sheer, which is very delicate, next to the muslin, starts a lot of different things happening that are layers. And then, of course, the foreground is physically a layer. I physically cut out that tree and glued it in the foreground, collaged it on there, and then stitched around all of the little branches to hold it in place.
Okay, we have quite a few more questions here. Great questions.
Okay.
So let me ask you one. How do you transfer the photographs onto fabric?
Okay, I'll tell you the quick way, and I have a little PDF that I'm happy to share with people that you can email me afterwards or contact me through my website, and I'll be glad to send it to you. There are lots of ways to do it. The way I do it is I have laser color copies printed at my local print shop. I bring them home. I glue them together, tape them together for my final size. I slather my fabric with gel medium, which is the gooey resin that's the goop that acrylic paint is made out of. It's also a glue. Then I transfer those copies onto the resin, rub, 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 wait 24 hours, rub off the paper, and the transfer is there. So that's how I do it. So I'm pulling the toner off of the paper onto the fabric. Right, lots of people print directly onto their fabric, and usually that would be an inkjet of some sort, or some people use solvents. So there's more than one way to get a photo on a fabric. This is just how I do it.
Yes, and so you have to remember when you're doing that too, that the photo is
Mirror image.
reversed. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Mirror, yes, yes.
And for those who have not scraped the paper off, that's really good at burning lots of calories.
But this is also where you can get your swearing practice in, because you'll say, this paper is never going to come off. It looks scummy. It's awful. It's white. Why did Bobbi tell me to do it this way? She's nuts. It doesn't just peel off easily. I just want to let you know that. So there are some tricks. There's some things you can do that will help it to come off. But yeah, you're really going to scrub that paper off of there. But I like this method. It suits me. It's low tech. It's tactile. And when it's done, I get a really good, clear photo. It pops. And some of the methods that I see artists using tend to be sort of ethereal, like we're looking in the scrapbook. And if that's not what I want, I really want that photo to pop.
Yes.
Like that little piece of water that we looked at that had the beautiful reflections. That wasn't going to work at all if it was hazy looking. I want to see the lights and the darks. I want a pop kind of photo. So that's why I do it this way. Not because it's the easiest, because it's not.
Nice. And so, Mary, her question is, are the photographs paper, but really what gets transferred is the inks onto the fabric.
Right. So little science lesson here about copies, because I used to be in the printing business, so I can do my laser color copy talk. A laser color copy is toner, which is attached to the paper by electrostatic charge. So that's why when those papers come out, if you go to your copy shop, they're warm because they've been transferred and then they've been heat sealed on there. So you can pull the toner off of the paper. So if the pull of your glue is stronger than that electrostatic charge, once it dries, the glue is going to pull the toner off of the paper. So then you just have to get rid of the paper. That's what's actually happening there. And that's quite different from inkjet printing, where there are all kinds of ways people put their fabric directly through their printer and they're printing right onto it. I'm actually transferring from something else onto the fabric.
Great. And then Marty would like to know how you got or you made the window.
That is, well, I saw the window. It looks like a church window, but it was actually the lattice shape on this old building from the 1800s in a little town not far from the land. And I took a photo of it one day and then I drew it. And so you may remember back in the picture of me painting that fabric, I used it as a stencil. So over on the right-hand side there, you can see I laid the stencil down on the fabric so it acted as a block out. And then I put some darker teal blue over the green, and the light green showed through to create the windows as a reverse. But then in the foreground, in that one, I actually cut that out. I painted a piece of fabric, that teal green color, then I physically cut it out with scissors, then I slapped it on and collaged it in place. So you had the positive and the negative speaking to each other and one showing through the other. So that's a nice thing about stencils, that once you get to playing with them, you get the feel that you can get two different things from one stencil, both a positive and a negative.
Now, the other window, was that a photo that you took again that you did a transfer to? And what I mean is the wood window.
Yeah, the wooden window is actually a photograph of a wooden window on a building in downtown DeLand.
Oh, I love that window. It's kind of nice and worn. Okay, and then Lucia says once the image is transferred onto the fabric, does the fabric tend to be stiff?
Yes, yes. All of my quilts are stiffer than the average art quilt. It's just a truism. Once you put acrylic paint on fabric, it's going to be more stiff than it was before you put the acrylic paint on there. All right, if it's a real thin layer, it isn't going to make it too stiff. If it's a heavy layer, it's going to make it pretty stiff. So yes, they are stiff. Yes, I can still sew through them because I stitched all over those photos. So that means the good thing is my quilts hang really nice and heavily on the wall. The bad thing is I can't fold them up and store them under the bed, as many quilters can. I can roll them to ship them, so they have some pliability, but my works are definitely stiffer than the average art quilt.
So if you wanted to keep it so it wasn't quite so stiff, you wouldn't put as thick a coat.
Yes, yeah. So you can play with it. And you can also, you don't have to use the gel medium. You can use matte medium, which is thinner. And I've done that on on other occasions. You have to experiment with what brand name you use and make sure it works.
Yes. Oh, spectacular. Okay, so we're ready for the next portion.
All right, so this is a different kind of piece. This is a memory piece. This is one of the few pieces that I've finished this year, Living in the House of Blue Shadows. This one also goes with my writing hopes. I've had a poem that I wrote about what it feels like to be a child carrying a little piece of sadness inside of you and what that felt like. And I've tried to create a number of works that speak to that. I thought, oh, maybe someday I'll make this into a children's book. Maybe I won't. But anyway, that's sort of how I've been going. I wanted some works that spoke to the parts of that poem. So this one is a very personal piece. Let me just show you what's in it. The little child on the right is my mom. This is a picture from the scrapbook. And she is just like she looks. Poor mom. She was just, she was most of her life not a happy soul. And her mother was beautiful and gorgeous and splashy. And my mom was not splashy. And she was fit into those molds as they did with children way more when she was young, but still somewhat when I was young, of you had to stand up straight, you had to wear your little dress coat, you had to wear the Mary Jane shoes, trying to fit girls into a mold. So that and other family dynamics were part of what her life was like. And I wanted to pick up on that. So it's not so much a cheery childhood memory. The other thing that I wanted was a house. I use houses in my artwork a lot. Usually I just draw a rectangle and put a triangle on top like a child draws a house. But I think I wanted a real architectural house, and I have been using a real architectural house in several works lately. This is not a house from my family. It's just a house in DeLand that I passed by and I said, wow, that's a great house. This looks like grandma's house. It's got dormer windows. It's got a porch. You know, it's just a wonderful archetypal house, and I'm going to use it as the model in a number of my work. So I decided to put together these things, a real picture of my mom, and then this house in DeLand. So there's the close-up of mom. It was very emotionally involving to be this tactily involved in creating this little paper doll that I also knew carried some memories of how I understand my mother all together. So it was a very personal, emotional thing to do. I love that little hat that she's wearing. I can't believe her mother made her wear it. I'm sure she tore it off as soon as they finished taking the picture. She's very static, kind of looks like a kid who's been put in a box. I also kept her face incomplete on purpose. And I thought then that spoke to me, to a child who doesn't seem to be recognized, or they don't feel like they're recognized as an individual. I think a lot of children feel that way. Even now, when I volunteer in a kindergarten class a couple days a week, and the most important thing to me to do, if I don't do anything else when I'm there, is to look a child in the face and have a conversation with them so they know someone thinks they're a real person with thoughts. And I think children do feel like they're not important or real a lot. That's a big deal to me. And also it makes her more universal. You know, why would anyone want a quilt with a picture of my mother on it? They wouldn't, but a universal child, maybe they would be more interested in that. So this is a little more playing with layers. This is what the digital photo looked of the house. I had to tile it and put it in sections because the final size on my quilt, that quilt is about 46 inches by 46 inches. So the final house was going to be bigger than the single 11-inch by 17-inch piece of paper that I can get from my copy shop. But I played in Photoshop more than I have in the past, putting two things together. So I took a photo I had shot of some tree limbs, and I superimposed it on the house and made the tree limbs transparent. And I thought, oh, that's pretty interesting. That's exactly what I want in this quilt. So it gave me one more way to get layers, to actually put layers in the photo. And I liked the way that turned out. You can see it here in the house underneath the roof line. You can see those gray shadows. Those are the layers that were actually in the photo themselves. And then I've added a lot more layers to it. Again, I physically cut out that foreground tree, cut it out with scissors, glued it on the surface. You can see that every inch of this is stitched, so I actually do a lot of quilting. That sky, I was very happy with the way that turned out. That was, there's a little stamp in there that I just carved out of that easy cut stuff and made some triangle shapes, and I printed those on sheer fabric, and I put that on top of a solid color muslin behind it, so it gave it a lot of depth. It's a little shiny here in the photo, hard to see. I was happy with that effect. This is another window that's in my vocabulary of windows. It's a real photo. It's actually my sister's dining room. She sent me a photo from inside her house, and I thought it was very intriguing. And I've done the same thing with those photos of the limbs that I put behind the window in Photoshop. So in this case, you may remember the last one back, I physically cut out the panes and stuck something fabric behind there. In this case, what you're seeing through the window is actually more digital photography of trees. Here's a sample of how things look when they're coming together. This is about the biggest size that I can work and do my quilting. That's maybe around 23 inches. And I just have a little sewing machine like those of you who are close to my age, you remember what it was like when we were teenagers and we started making garments. We just had these crummy little Singer sewing machines. So I have a nicer machine now, but it's still the same size. So whatever I make, I've got to get in that 7-inch throat. So if a big quilt, I have to do my quilting as I go, and then I join the sections. So in this case, I've collaged those pieces together. All of the stuff on there is either photo transfer or a piece of fabric that I have printed. And now I am putting that big tree on the front. You can see the little pieces of masking tape. I laid the tree out, And when it has a lot of limbs like that, they flap around all over the place. So I masking tape them in place. And now what's in my hand is the bottle of matte medium, and I'm just brushing it on. Brush it under the fabric and over the fabric. Slather, slather, slather. You can't put on too much to hold it in place. And then I work my way up the tree and glued down the limbs one limb at a time so the others wouldn't flop away. And it's not such a strong glue that it sets down immediately. So if the limb goes in the wrong place, I can move it a little bit until it dries. Once it dries, it's on there.
Now you talked a little bit about oh, there it is. You've got a
Right,
fab.
right. So
Let's see. So the question is, what sewing machine do you use to sew all the layers of fabric, and what base material do you prefer to use?
all right, so I collage the fabric onto a substrate, and the substrate will either be a piece of cotton muslin, and then behind that will be a piece of polyester craft felt. That's what I use for my batting, because you need enough batting that it will look quilty when it's stitched, but I don't want thick loft. And really, my machine does not want any more thickness in there. It goes chug, chug, chug as it is to get through this thick stuff that I'm sewing. Sometimes, as in this case, I don't think I put the cotton muslin behind the fabric. I just glued it directly to the felt. So it depends on what the material is. But this shows you what it looks like trying to get a big piece through my machine and why I have to work in sections.
Yes. And Lucia says, does the sewing gunk up your machine?
Over time, you absolutely never, ever, ever want to put wet glue in your sewing machine. So anything I've collaged has to sit at least 24 hours before I put it in the sewing machine. And it will, over time, get a little gunk on the needle, and I'll clean it off with rubbing alcohol. And my sewing machine repair guy has taught me how to troubleshoot my bobbin casing with a little bit of WD-40 and a little bit of alcohol, and then sewing machine oil so that I can get the gunk out. And then once a year, I take it in for a good cleaning, at least once a year if I've been working. You've got to be nice to your machine. And I have another FAF that's almost identical. That's my backup. If I've just worked this one too hard, I go to plan B for a while. All right, and so then here we are back at the finished piece. I think the character that was important to me jumps out, mostly because of the color contrast. She's right down there in the corner. You notice I added some other characters in the upper left, the 3 birds on a wire. I frequently incorporate birds in my piece. First of all, I just like birds. And they also really function to me as storytellers. You know, you can remember the Disney stories of the birds on the wire, you know, as the character is in trouble, they're up there going, look out, look out, look out, here comes the goblin. And and they also can provide commentary. So you can decide what you think the birds are doing, if they're messengers or if they are providing commentary. But all of those elements are there then. The big house from DeLand, that window from my sister's dining room, those are the only photographic pieces. Oh, and behind the blue window, that one tall tree that kind of goes like this, that's also a photograph, a tree that was near my home. And I wanted another real element in there. And then all the rest of it is not real, but memory kinds of things as represented by pattern on fabric.
Okay, let's see. Another question. Joanne wants to know, any reason you don't use fusible web?
It's just how I started. I knew about collage before I'd ever heard of fusible web, and now I'm used to it. You could work a similar process with fusible web. Because I paint all of my fabric with acrylics, the acrylic collaging is completely compatible, so it doesn't show up. I don't get a white ick or anything on the fabric. If you had fabric that was created in a different way, some commercial fabric or maybe dyed fabric, you maybe would want to experiment before you slathered matte medium on it, because it might show up. It might affect the look of your fabric in addition to the hand of it. I know it won't affect my fabric because everything is created with acrylic paints. So I've just gotten used to it. I like it.
So one thing I really love about all of your work, Bobbi, is I can look at it and find something new every time I see it. You know, when you talk about the depth, it's not just in the contrasts, it's in the story and the layers and all of that.
I really appreciate your saying that. It's something that I strive for. Even in my little collaged works, I try to use the metaphor of a favorite book. You know, you read it the first time, you thought you got it, but if you go back again, you discover something that you didn't read or understand the first time. And, you know, if someone is going to be kind enough to be a patron and have one of my works in their home, I don't want it to be like the first date where they got it all. You want to have a reason to go back for the second date, you know, that there's something more interesting to see. So I strive to do that.
With a quilt this meaningful, how do you put it up for sale? I mean, when you've put so much of your heart and soul into something that has such a personal message to it, how can you release that?
Easily. The greatest thing in the world is to let it go. And I am often surprised when I look at my large pieces where a patron has been kind enough to purchase them and put them in their home. They are among the most personal pieces I have created. I think, how could, really, they wanted that? That told a story from my life that was really personal to me. But I think what that means is there are experiences, especially experiences of women. I tend to sell more to women than to men, although I'm happy to have anyone, you know, take my artwork. Women really relate to these journey stories about other women. And so that's why it is universal. I think most women at some time in their life, all of us in different ways, depending on our age and life experience, have felt ignored or invisible. And so why I felt that way was my unique story, but someone else probably felt that way too. And they may see things in this piece that I never intended, that are not what I saw, but if I've made it universal enough, it's going to speak to someone else. And I'd love knowing then that someone else has it.
Yes. And I also love how you place the colors that pop, you know, that there's a specific reason for, you know, the yellow to be where it is, and for the oranges and what that adds to the story and the movement in the piece.
Well, thank you. I love that yellow window in the house. It was an important part of it. And this is probably more monochromatic than most of my works are, but it really helped me just to stay in blue. I was in all blue all the time until almost at the end, when I put in those two brown horizontal stripes and the orange pop down in the right. And if I can just concentrate on value and content and composition and meaning and not have to worry about a whole bunch of different colors, then I'll put in my pop of color at the end. It just helps me to think that way.
Yes. Okay, so going back to some of the questions that are still outstanding, Lucia says, when you're hand cutting and creating your stencils, do you prefer freezer paper, Tyvek, and do the edges tend to ripple or curl?
Great technical question. Freezer paper is wonderful for maybe a one-time stencil. Like if you're going to put a big circle on something, freezer paper is fabulous. You can use it again, but it doesn't store real easily because it curls up and stuff. My preferred stencil material is a thin cardboard like manila file folders, about that thickness. And then I can use a stencil over and over and over again. I have some that are hanging on my wall that, you know, I've had for years. As you paint acrylic paint over them, they just get stronger. And sometimes I will also coat the file folder with matte medium on both sides and let it dry before I cut it out. And then it's like you've laminated it. It makes your stencil very strong, but still thin and easy to cut. I've used Tyvek very rarely because it's floppy and just kind of awkward, but it works. It's a nice stencil because it's very, very thin, but I would tend to use it more for very simple shapes. I wouldn't be able to, for example, those trees in the foreground there, I have those cut out of manila file folders. So when I wanted to make that tree, I could just lay the stencil down and trace it with a pencil, and then I could cut out my fabric. Or I could have laid that stencil down, run a paint roll over it, and use it as a resist so that then whatever was behind the tree was going to show through. So investing in shapes and shapes that mean something to you is really, I think, a great investment. Over time, you'll have a vocabulary of what looks like your work because your stencils keep coming back into it. So I don't buy commercial stencils. I only cut my own.
I mean, it's unique to you.
Right.
It's your voice, it's your message, and that makes perfect sense to me. I've never thought about using file folders.
File folders are really good. Another thing that's really great, this is like my super secret, the thin cardboard that frozen food comes in. Like if you get a Stouffer's macaroni and cheese box, and you open it up flat, it's a very thin cardboard, like a file folder, but it's already a little waxy on two sides. They make fabulous stencils.
Oh, reuse them. That's awesome. So Debbie wants to know, do you ever use fabric medium mix in with acrylic paint to soften it so it's not
Yes,
so stiff?
absolutely. Yeah, sometimes I print opaque, sometimes I print sheer. So yes.
Nice. Okay. And then Dee, this is really a great question. And that is, how do you hang your work? So if somebody loves one of your pieces, and how do you make sure that they can hang it?
Wow, this is almost like a plant. I would hope that someone would ask that, and thank you very much. It's a standard in art quilting. The way they are hung is there's a pocket across the back, which you put a rod through, and the pocket has some give to it so that it won't pooch through the front, so that you hang it on that rod, like a drapery rod, but usually it's actually a 3/4 inch wooden dowel is what I normally use. It hangs nice and flat, and because my works are heavy, they do hang nicely. And then I've made a little hole in the top of that pocket with a D-ring in it, just like hanging a picture. So you take it out of the box and hang it on a picture frame, and it's there. Easy, just like a picture.
And then how would you care for one of your pieces?
Well, any artwork should never be hung in direct sun. That's a pretty important thing. Other than that, dust it every now and then. You could, I wouldn't recommend it, but if you had a cloth that was just slightly damp, it wouldn't hurt it. But you don't want to put a lot of moisture on it. I would say just dust it now and then. It doesn't need anything. This is like an acrylic painting. If you've bought an acrylic painting from an artist that was on a canvas, they put acrylic paint on a canvas and you hang it in your home and you don't do anything to it. This is acrylic paint on a fabric. It got there in more layers than on a single thing, but it's as far as durability and how it would be in your home, you should feel about it like you would feel about an acrylic painting.
Great questions, everybody. And let's talk about the few questions that I have left for you. And
Okay.
if anybody, continue to put your questions in the chat. We are at 9:51, so we want to be respectful of your time, and we don't want to go too far over. So again, we may miss a couple questions here, but I know that Bobbi would be happy to answer questions after the fact. You can definitely contact her. Okay, so you also teach, Bobbi.
I do.
And what I love about that is the artists who are willing to share their knowledge and experience with the rest of us. What do you teach, or what concepts do you hope to share with artists?
Well, I think I really teach in two different ways. One is in my weekly blog. I post it every single Sunday night faithfully, and that's just about whatever I'm doing in the studio that week. So for people who like to learn, how do you do that? What materials do you use? How does it work? Stuff like that. I do that every Sunday night, and it's free. I started doing it for me. It's a wonderful discipline, to keep track of what I've been working on and to try find the meaning in it. And it's just the way that I can share little tips on how I do this or how I do that. Nothing is secret. So I don't teach classes or workshops on the how-to methods. I can give you the workshop right now for free. Get some acrylic paints, get some fabric, go in your studio, put them together. There you go. That's the workshop. It's all I can tell you. You have to find your own methods of working, but I'm happy to share or answer questions anytime. Now, the workshops that I do teach, I really love focusing more on what goes into a work before you start making it. So I have a course on content, and these are really Zoom presentations that take about an hour or so. And if they're close to me, I go teach in person. If they're far away, I teach by Zoom. Content, how you come up with the ideas, how you develop a story and meaning. So one on content, one on composition. How do you decide what you're going to put where in the picture plane, and how is that going to affect how the person feels when they look at it? And then I do have a workshop that I teach about the relationship between surface design on fabric, which is what I do, and printmaking as an art form on its own. Just because I love printmaking, and there's actually a lot of what printmakers do, wood blocks and linoleum cut blocks and screen printing, that are also used by artists. So I think it helps makers have a broader understanding of how what we do fits into the larger scope of art making generally.
Mhm.
And that tends to have a little more in it, pictures of how I do things. But I really just want people to know about those two things. So for now, I only have 3 presentations that I teach. I'm due to start to come up with something new, so I can, you know, I don't want to be invited back and do the same thing. So
Yes,
that's
so
Ideation.
people can get in touch with you or follow your blog and they'll be able to find out what you've got coming up.
Yep. Yep.
Okay,
I
so
don't do them like workshops and you sign up. I come as a guest by invitation. So let's say there's someone who has a monthly meeting and they bring in speakers, they invite me then, and that's how I teach.
nice. Okay, Mary Jo says, Bobbi's blog is wonderful. I've subscribed for
Thank
several
you.
years. Oh, wait, I'm losing it here. Oh, and always look forward to her Sunday night emails.
Thank you.
And then Sarah says, Bobbi, you are a wonder. Your discussions are clear and understandable, and your work is astounding.
Thank you. That's very nice.
I love that word astounding, Sarah.
Yeah.
That's so true, isn't it? Okay, and Susan says, fantastic presentation. Thanks for sharing.
Thanks, Susan.
Okay, so just a couple more things. What do you love about being an artist?
I don't know if I could imagine not being an artist. I think it's just part of who I am. I think part of it is the self-directedness and the sense of agency that I'm going to choose where I go, if I make something, if I don't make something, what the next thing would be if I change direction. I really like being able to chart my own course. That's very important to me. And that because I am an artist, it's not like I do this on purpose so I can be an artist. It just seems to be who I am, that there's a deeper level of meaning in looking at life in general, like looking at that little drainage ditch of that little spit of water near my house, or looking at pictures in the scrapbook. I it is how I perceive the world to try and look at things with a deeper understanding, and I can't imagine not living that way.
Yeah, it's amazing how you do notice things more.
Right.
You pay attention more to what's around you. How can people learn more about you and your work
Well,
besides?
it just happens that I have a website, and that website is BobbiBaughStudio.com. It's Bobbi, Bobbi, Baugh, Baugh, BobbiBaughStudio.com. And there's pictures of my works there, and my blog is also in it. And if you wanted to contact me, there's an email there, and you can get in touch with me that way. And I would love that.
Yes, and then what do you want to explore next? What's the next challenge?
Well, the very next thing, I still have this watercolor bug, and I've tried a couple of things of working on muslin that I gesso it up like you would paper, and I haven't been happy with the finished product. I know it's in there. I know I can make it happen, but that's sort of the next thing that's intriguing me.
Now, Bobbi, we've talked about a lot during this time. Is there anything that you would like to add?
Yes, 2 shout outs. One to Artburst Studios. I'm guessing that a lot of the people watching this already know about Artburst and how you got here, but if you got here from some other way, put this organization on your radar. You all put out online shows several times a year. They're wonderful. The way you're working it is right for the artists. You're very enthusiastic and good. So if you're a patron or if you're a maker, put Artburst Studio on your radar of people to know their tops. Even Jennifer, and especially Jennifer. And also, if you're just the word textile arts, if that doesn't mean a lot to you or you don't know what that is, the best way I could recommend to someone to know more is through SAQA, which is Studio Art Quilt Associates. It is the preeminent international organization for the promotion of art quilts as gallery and museum worthy work. SAQA.com. And you can just look at beautiful artwork that will blow your mind. You could join, you can find out about other textile artists. The world is learning that textile art is as legitimate a museum worthy medium as painting or sculpture or anything else, but everyone in the world doesn't know. And that's a wonderful organization.
Oh, Bobbi, thank you so much for spending time
Oh,
with
shoot,
us.
thank you. This has been fabulous.
When we were looking, searching for artists, which, we're always on the look for amazing artists, fiber and textiles were one of the categories that was high on our list, I think. And I appreciate the shout out about Artburst too. We just want people to know that art comes in so many different styles and different mediums, and there's so many beautiful voices out there. So it's been a total honor to work with you and to have you today
Okay.
at our Artburst Live sessions. And I want to let all of you know that our July Artburst Live interview will be with artists Amelia Furman and Lucy Shappy, who are featured artists in our upcoming online show, Beyond Beautiful, that opens in August. So if you're not a subscriber yet on Artburst, go ahead and subscribe, and you'll be getting notifications on that. But the Artburst Live interviews really have just started back up. I mean, I used to do them before, and we love it. I always learn so much as an artist, as an art collector. I'm always fascinated, Bobbi, by your story and the story of other artists. We're just kind of all kindred spirits here, whether we're art lovers, whether we're well, let's face it, we're all artists in our own right, and in whatever fashion or form. So we'll be in touch in the next few weeks, and we hope to see you at our next Artburst Live, and that you get connected with Bobbi right away, because make sure you subscribe, because these nuggets of wisdom are going to continue to be shared in her blog post and in her newsletters. So we wish you all a wonderful Saturday, and we'll look forward to seeing you next month.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you.